Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're just getting ready to get started here in 5 minutes, so stand by. While we're waiting, I just put up a screen share of our networked.io command and control software that's running both radar AI and video AI, just to have something to watch while we're waiting. We're getting a little bit of snow here in Utah, finally. It's nice to see that finally come. I'm sure the East Coast has been inundated and would be more than happy for pushing some of that snow over on the west side of the country. So we are seeing a little bit of that right now.
Yeah, it's been way too dry here in Colorado. We've been usually we'd have probably several feet of snow by now, and it's been a spring day every day.
Oh, I was seeing blossoms and tulips coming up in our driveway.
Oh
So
no.
that's uh, that's how warm it's been as of late. So
I guess we'll have to come do some skiing with you guys up there. And what's the big one? Is it in Provo? Which one's got the big ski resorts?
yeah, so here in the kind of the Provo, Orem County area, it's got Sundance that's up to Provo Canyon.
Oh yes.
It's Sundance used to be Robert Redford's resort that he got started. It's a small kind of local one.
Yeah,
It's a nice
I've,
place, nice little
I've stayed
place.
there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, looks like a little part of the Swiss Alps, really. Got a big mountain there, very steep
Yeah.
cliffs.
Yeah, we got some good weather here yesterday. Kind of rolled in early in the morning. Just you see this dark cloud. It was like looking at the, Mountain of Doom or something coming in, rolling in over the mountains. And it looked like there was a lot of snow in it and whatever. And within, I'd say an hour and a half or 2 hours, it had completely blown by, back to blue skies, and just, getting up in the 50s or 60s again. It's really been quite something. Let's see. Looks like we're supposed to be 48 today. Maybe we could use our radars and do some weather manipulation ourselves. I don't know.
I don't think you got enough power on those radars to do
Okay.
much
Is that what the story
manipulation of
is?
anything.
That's what our engineers are for.
Yeah. But we'll be starting in 1 minute. All right. It's time to start. Thank you for joining, everyone. We are excited to talk about something that's very relevant at this time in the world, where we're dealing with a huge proliferation of drones throughout the world, the United States especially. I was just reading one study that where they did a poll of about 2,000 people, and 12% of those people responded they did own a drone. So if that's applied across the whole population of the United States, that's an estimated 30 million drones in the United States right now. So I'm excited to have David Wallace for Surveillance One join us. David, you want to give a little introduction?
Yeah, you bet. My name is David Wallace. I am a co-founder and CEO of Surveillance One. We are a security integrator that's been in business for about 26 years. We've played a key role in the development of different security methodologies and how it impacts critical infrastructure, and moving towards things that's not just, hey, the client wants this, and so we want to integrate this part. It's really more about how we architect security from a position that is different than what we've done in the past. Different than the design basis threat methodologies or methodologies based in probabilities and likelihood. Those are rearward facing methodologies that don't really set us up very well for modern threats, such as when we have things happen like drones. So if you're going to prepare your site or your critical infrastructure that you're responsible for, how are you going to look backwards to how many things have happened regarding drones to how you prepare your facility and your site? So that's a part of what this conversation is about today, for looking at the national airspace crisis and how we facilitate architecting the right type of security.
And David and myself, we've been working together on this problem for quite some time. And so, David, why don't you go ahead and kind of explain that problem for us?
Yeah, you bet. Let's kick this off on the national airspace crisis subject. I think the whole world has really been paying attention to what really kicked off in Ukraine. It's not that these problems didn't exist before, but it really got highlighted on the world stage in the Ukraine and Russia crisis. So in that crisis, we began to see things like all kinds of inventive methodologies for drones. So instead of using let's say radio frequency to control drones, because that was so easily jammed, and maybe it switched to GPS or GNSS, right? But then that would get jammed. So hey, let's switch over to fiber. And now we saw fiber, communications for drones being flown at 25 kilometers away. And the last I saw, there's a kind of a fight to the finish line to who can get to 50 kilometers on just a fly-by-wire on a fiber optics line. And so it's very tough to detect that from a radio frequency or jamming when things are flown by fiber. One of the navigation systems that's now come out is the use of an aerial AI-driven navigation. So just like you'd have a carrier pigeon that you train it to look at a map, so it sees where it's going to fly because it recognizes where it's going by the map. It's the same thing. They're training the optics, the cameras on the drones to do it the same way. So,
and David, like this was illustrated. I mean, on this slide here is from the attack by the Ukrainians on the Russians. Far behind the front lines, where they had those Connex boxes filled with drones in the roof that automatically pop up and navigated by video AI fully autonomously. That was pretty amazing. There's no way to jam that because it's not using GPS, like you're saying.
Well, and Logan, one of the things you have highlighted on the screen here is, fast moving at greater than 50 miles an hour. And that's important because you have to realize that a lot of the drones that are flying in the US, most of them top out around 45. But you get these high-speed drones and drone races, and people are building them in their homes going 350, 400 miles an hour. That begins to be increasingly difficult to detect and to get in front of. And so that has real implications for what that means here at home on US soil. What does that mean when this type of threat comes to a theater near you? And how are you going to stand in front of it to protect the critical infrastructure that you've been given responsibility to protect?
Yeah, and then I mean, I think that's a really good point you were making. And now this technology, this fiber optic guided drone technology, is readily available. In fact, you can go to Alibaba and search for fiber optic drone kit, and you can find one with like a 30-kilometer range kit for just under $400. It's readily available. I mean, it's incredible that this technology. I mean, I saw the first mentions of this from from the Ukraine-Russia war in December of 2024, and now here it is, February of 26, and you can buy this off the shelf and get it ordered and dropped off at your front door.
Yeah, if you're curious how that works and you haven't seen it, basically they send it with a canister with the piece of fiber coming off the end of it. Once that fiber is connected into the drone takes off at whatever speed it's going to take off with, and that fiber just spools right off the end of that canister. There's no big fiber mess. It's not like a reel. It's wound up in the spool. Yeah, there's a good example of it right there.
There it is. This is on Alibaba here, and that's the 30 kilometers for $371 that you can go buy and order.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So, so here's the question we hear a lot is, hey, that's overseas. That's between the Ukraine and Russia. And we're skeptical. Is this really going to be a threat in our homeland, or is this just kind of a futuristic threat? And the funny thing is, we hear people actually make comments to that sometimes, even to our website. Oh, you guys have a really futuristic website. You're really doing some futuristic things, And it always strikes me as somebody who maybe hasn't been watching, the news of what is actually happening. So as we kick off this, I want to give you 5 quick illustrations of what is happening real time here in the US. So the first one would be kind of what we see in Ukraine is these kinetic strikes. Well, are drones really being used to go, smash into critical infrastructure? We've seen in Russia, Ukraine would fly them into airports, into fuel depots, into trains, anything to disrupt the critical infrastructure, not just tanks, not just military assets, but other assets, power grid and things like that. Well, last month, I don't know if you heard about this. Last month, there was a young man named Skylar Philippi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, 24 years old, just got indicted for developing a weapon of mass destruction in Tennessee. And his weapon of mass destruction was to create a home-built drone. So the intent was that it would be less susceptible to be seen or intercepted by federal agents or anybody else that might be watching the airspace. So no remote ID. And so he wanted to have this home-built drone, and he was developing and strapping a plastic explosives to it, so C4. And his intent was to fly it into a power substation in Nashville, Tennessee. He was apprehended, and there's been another couple stories like it. But here's this guy, 24 years old, tweeting out in advance about, yes, exactly, tweeting out in advance that if you're an accelerationist, and if you're not familiar with that word, this means somebody who wants to accelerate the end of society as we know it, and we're just going to plan that we're going to be the last man standing, so we'll be in charge now, right? And there's other reasons why people are accelerationists. But if he basically tweeted out, if you're an accelerationist, then this is the best way to help bring an end to society as we know it, is to fly drones with C4 explosives strapped to it into power substations and try to collapse the power grid or create a cascading event. Very serious. I won't go into the implications of what would be on the backside of that, but you guys are probably familiar, or it's pretty easy to look that up of what the implications of something like that are. That's number one. That's a kinetic strike. Number two, what about illegal payloads, like illicit drug stops? So people who are involved in drugs, they don't have to go down to the dark hidden street corner, some back alley somewhere in downtown and meet with a drug dealer. On our systems here, we catch people regularly flying drones in the middle of the night and doing drops into remote backyards at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We come in, we see the reports, we see what's happening. We see our law enforcement team and their drones. They go out after that kind of thing. But that's how it's being used in a negative way. But don't just think about illicit or illegal payloads like a drug drop, think about this in a different capacity. Every time that there's a stadium event, as an example, there are people who try to fly drones, into, let's say, an NFL event. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of coordinated effort to get in front of that. But consider this. What if you had a delivery drone, say like a Flight Cart 100? It's a DJI drone. It's capable of about 220-pound payload. What if something like that carries a 5-gallon bucket of water and flies it over the middle of a stadium and dumps that bucket of water? So while the substance itself may not even be, a chemical or weaponized payload, what's going to happen to the tens of thousands of people in that stadium who are now seeing that happen and are going to trample themselves to death to get out of the stadium? It doesn't have to be a direct strike by the drone to create real upset in operations. So that'd be point number 2. We have kinetic strikes. We've got illegal payloads or illicit drops. Number 3, what about data sniffing or data theft? I'm going to hold something up on the screen here. In 2018, we had a military facility that came to us. We were already working with the particular site with their security platforms, and they said, "Hey, we keep having these drones landing on our roofs, our launch facilities." And we said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "Well, yeah, these we think they just run out of batteries, so they just land on the roof and we throw them away." Well, people weren't really thinking about it at the time, and we said, "Hey, can we see this drone?" And it had another payload package on it that was small, and I'm going to show you an example of it here. And this was one that we recreated, and all this is a Raspberry Pi with a little plastic case. Our IT guys created this. It's got a small antenna. It had another antenna that would plug in, and it's the only thing Velcro to this is a battery pack. So this battery pack on this amount of energy, let's say you can run it for about a week. So maybe the drone has about let's say on average a 30-minute shelf life or battery life to get to its target. It lands on the roof of its target. And then what happens with this little guy is it creates a Wi-Fi deauthentication event. It bumps the Wi-Fi. And when it bumps the Wi-Fi, it causes everything to disconnect and then reconnect back. So your phone, all day long, every day, that happens, and it just reconnects automatically. For whatever reason, it loses signal, it just reconnects. When it reconnects, it sends all of your credentials to reconnect again. With this little guy, the very first time we use it as a test, we bumped the Wi-Fi, did a deauthentication event, captured the first set of credentials that came in, and then we hashed that set of credentials against a rainbow table. And we had the passwords for that in about 20 minutes. It turned out that particular one wasn't a heavily encrypted password, but it gives you the idea of what's capable, and with enough processing power, because all this thing is doing is just doing data collection. Well, now once we're in the Wi-Fi, now we're just looking for weak spots. How do we, if this runs for a week or 2 or 3 weeks, think about how much payload you could put on a drone and how much battery you could put in to last for a long time to start doing data collection.
So you're saying they're collecting that data for longer periods of time and then exfilling that out to some other third location?
That's exactly it. Or it's another drone that stops by to collect.
Yeah. So another drone that comes by and then, sets up a short distance transfer, downloads the data and flies back out.
Exactly.
So corporate espionage, government espionage, that type of thing.
This is a big deal for a lot of organizations, but especially data centers. There's about 4,000 something data centers in the U.S. This has become a real concern. It's not just, and when we think about that context, it's not just what's the most precious asset of the data center. It might be the data that's inside, or maybe it's how they process AI. But it's also the critical assets that are outside. What about all the cooling systems? What about all the power generation? What about the backup generation? What about all the fiber nodes that bring the data in and out? There's a lot of vulnerable exposures here that the fence line no longer protects. There is no fence line in the airspace. It's direct access. So that's just the data sniffing and data theft threat. I'm going to give you 2 more real quick. Surveillance and loitering. So what happens when a drone, no matter what the intent, we're not going to even assign if it's malicious intent or not, is just loitering outside or right above your property line, your perimeter, or maybe over your facility itself. And maybe it's not doing anything, or you can't see if it's doing anything. Is it data collecting? Is it performing surveillance? Is it collecting some other type of information? But just the fact that it's sitting up there loitering for 10 or 15 minutes, what happens to your operational continuity? What's the plan then? What all is being lost while everybody tries to figure out what to do with this drone? I'll give you one more. We talk about the national threat to the airspace here. In the last 12 months, we've had about 730,000 LANCE violations, so people flying into controlled airspace without authorization or flying above 400 feet. We recently had an airport come to us and said, hey, we think we get maybe 20 incursions a month. We're not sure. We don't really have a way to tell. Can you look at this and test and see? And we did. What came out of that was 269 flights by 127 unique drones over a 30-day period. That's substantial. And the part that you need to be concerned about here is that nobody knew. Once a drone's about 200 to 300 feet away, it becomes really difficult to see and really difficult to hear. And so the typical response is, well, we don't have any drones in our airspace. We don't have any, no drones fly around our facility. No drones fly around our event center. And you have to ask, well, how do you know that? So the real question you have to ask is, what are you doing to detect when a drone enters your airspace? That's the real question. So we're at a point now in the US that we can no longer pretend that these drone problems don't exist. Pretending that they don't exist isn't a strategy. So we cannot address the problem without technology because we can't defend against what we can't see. If we don't have the awareness of it, we can't defend it. So Logan, I'll pass it back over to you to talk about the technology itself and kind of illustrate how that works. And then and we'll come back and we'll look at how we architect that for critical infrastructure.
Well, I'd love to do that. We are collaborating, of course, with Surveillance One in terms of providing the full solution. We have the technology stack that helps to detect, track, and alert operators that there are threats in your area. It starts at the base layer, the sensor layer. There are ground radars, air radars for tracking drones in airspace. Recently, this last year, we released what we call the remote drone ID sensor. That's one that picks up FAA compliant drones. So these would be commercial off-the-shelf drones. All that data flows up to the next level of kind of like software layer, which is the C2, the command and control software that brings in the sensor data, cues camera, and then does real-time alarming. And then all of that data goes up either to like a video management system. We integrate with lots of VMSs like Genetec, Vigilon, Honeywell, ProWatch, Exact Vision, just like 20 different VMS systems that we integrate and pass real-time video over to, and then monitoring that whole system, especially if it's a large enterprise, or you're thinking like substations across a utility. You need to know kind of what that all is, and that's the top layer, the integrated management center. So let's show you some real stuff. Let's go live here. I was showing earlier, this is a networked I/O system that is at our office. We can see right now there isn't much going on. So let's go take a look at the history. We have up here over the top, we've got an RDID. You can see this circle here. That's the kind of like the real-time coverage area that we can cue a camera onto target, onto a drone using the remote ID data. So if to kind of give you an idea, most all drones, all commercial drones you can buy since September of 2022 has the remote ID built into it. So it's like think of it as like a license plate. Or if you're familiar on the flight side, ADS-B is kind of similar, but now this is ADS-B for drones. And it's broadcasting this over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and the remote ID sensor picks that up. So let's go take a look. You know, David was talking about how, just in that one airport area, how over the course of, you said it was a week that they had all those drone incursions?
Yeah, 30 days.
30 days. So in 30 days. So let's go look over the last 2 weeks here. So I'm going to look over from the 17th until the 2nd, so 2 weeks. And I'm not going to look at all the tracks, but I'm just going to look at small drones, and I'm going to look at drone pilots. So I'm just filtering to see, okay, what happened in the drone space. I've got both ground and air data coming in to this one software package. So taking a look at that, we got 156. Let's take a look at all those. So we have 156 in this suburban area. Here we go. This is this is the drone traffic, and this is wintertime. In the summertime, we see even more than this, and we can start seeing some interesting things here. This group, this right here, this flight right there, that's our drone flying some circles over a park area. So we marked that one. It's tagged blue, so it's friendly. We have one here that's yellow alert. So we can see that they had one come in like that. These other ones that you can see out here, these are just regular drones. So I can look at things about this. I can say I want to see the serial number. So let's turn on and see the serial numbers. And that's one of the nice things about remote drone ID is that you can see the serial numbers associated with that. And if they've registered in the FAA database, you can actually look up and see who it is. So you can see this one right here. This is the same person over in this area, and the drone was flying up over here along this path over this. It's a kind of a walking road here, and we've got another one. So we have people. Now this one's really interesting right here. If you can take a look at this, they're flying this one right here. We've got P04 is the end of that, and here's the operator who was flying this drone all the way out over this mountain. So that's like 3 miles. That was definitely out of line of sight. I mean, David, as you were saying, after a few hundred feet, you can't see the drones anymore. And
Right.
the current law is that you cannot fly your drone out of your field of view.
And you
And
might
we
get
can
a little
see
bit
here,
further at night with the lights on. We hear some of that, but it's it gets difficult. It starts to become questionable.
yeah, and you can see this person right here down in this neighborhood flew this drone all the way out over here to the top of this mountain, several miles away, right there. So definitely that was a violation right there. And this happens all the time.
And notice too, as Logan has the screen pulled up, it's not just the pilot location. When you're using remote ID or the drone location, with remote ID, you see the pilot location as well. You can see over in his left-hand column that it's actually giving the lat and long coordinates of where the pilot is.
Yeah, and one of the things that we can do here, if we select this on one of these drone pilots, is we put in a new feature where you can just click right there and it'll pop up in Google Maps and give you directions to where that drone pilot is to make it easier. So, because one of the questions that just saw pop up are we going to cover countermeasures? Yes, we will cover what there is available and what can be done and the kind of scope of that. Because one of the things that we say, there's a lot of restrictions when it comes to what is legally allowed in the United States to do countermeasures, and that will determine what you can do with it. Now, one of the things you can always do if you can pick up their drone ID and you know where the pilot is, you can go out to the pilot, you can call the police, you can send out security to the pilot, and that way you can, we say, find the pilot, stop the drone.
Yeah, that's the best path for mitigation, really. And in a minute, for those that are asking about this, I'll show a slide and kind of address some of that and what we can do, what we can do, and kind of how that works, as well as that unique ID that you're asking about, Andrew.
So so after you get all this real-time data and you're sharing it, this information can be pushed over in real time to a video management system. One of the things that we do is we convert this into an RTSP stream, the live view. So when we're into the live view and there's an event here, like we can see this person who's going to be leaving here. Let me turn on so we can see the ground tracks as well. So this live view right here can be pushed, taken into, converted into a video stream and pushed live into a video management center. We can also trigger events, so that can trigger like a workflow into VMS. It also, we monitor that with our top layer, which is the integrated management center, which monitors many sites. So you can get statistical information as well, real-time alarming. So let's go to this. Let's go back to the system map here. So this is the system level view where you can have many sites come into this one system. And with that allows us to say, okay, well, is something happening? I can come in here, I can take a look and see, oh, yeah, there's my alarms. I can see I had a drone incursion. I can click into it and see, okay, where the path of this drone take? I can see the data about it. I can also look at the alarms, and it looks like I have to log back in. It logged me out. So let me log back in here. There we go. So back in, let's see here, and pull up my track there, and so I can see my image of my drone, where it came in, the date, the time. I can see the path here and see where it took the path. And all that data and the health data then is integrated up into the integrated management center so that you can see what's happening across your whole system. Because if you don't know how your whole system is working, then what good is it going to do you if some parts are non-functional, for whatever reason, communication failures, and that's what the integrated management center is, to monitor the health and the performance of a whole system with hundreds of sites. Okay, we had a few questions come up.
I'll chime in on that too, Logan.
Yeah.
That management for different sites, this is a really important point to bring up, because we have seen a lot of frustration in the industry in general, especially over the last year, and a lot of hesitancy that some of the providers that are out there, or I'd say almost all of them, mandate a cloud solution. So in other words, when you're detecting all these, drones and events and users and all that, it ports out to a cloud, and it's managed in the cloud. And that data that's in the cloud is captured by that host company and then shared outside of that for profit, or shared for marketing, or sell for resell to new users. And that data is just it becomes fractured. And the argument is that, well, that data was already out there. We just collected it. It's out there no matter where it is. Here's the thing. When you're paying money for a collection for a counter UAS, you want to be the ones in control of the data that's over your site. And whatever you do with that data is important. So what Logan's talking about here is the ability to share that data through the integrated management center here with all the different other sites that are inside of your, under your corporate logo, your umbrella, whatever that is. So you've got sister sites around the country or around the world. That gives you the ability to share that information across all of your sites, to manage information across the sites. I'm sure Logan will talk about, measuring health of the different devices and things like that. But that's a really important distinction here, is that while you get to share that information with anybody that you want to share it with, but you get to remain in control of your data at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for making that. And that's just, differences of how, the businesses develop their products. Spotter came from the kind of the roots of the company was with special forces and critical infrastructure sites like electrical utilities that are air gapped from the internet. So yes, we do use web browsers for visualizations. We use, Ethernet and TCP/IP networking for connecting, but we're not reliant on internet services, and your data stays within your control on your premise. So that's, on your site. So that way you can control, what's shared or what's not shared, and also what level of access. That could be potentially be exploited if you've got, whenever you have a connection to the internet, someone's going to be trying to hack into your systems. So both our radars, our networked IO C2 software, our IMC can all be, hosted locally on your site. So that's a good point you made. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
So we had a couple other questions. So Andrew was saying that they were told recently that the drone ID feature was not available to all users. Has this changed, or this still in production? It's still in production. All the commercial drones that are being produced today legally are equipped with a remote ID. Now there is a caveat to that. Is that if it's a very small drone, so below 250 grams, 250 grams is like a half a pound. If it's less than that half a pound weight, it does not have to transmit its unique ID and its position and the operator's position. And that's just the current law in the United States. So a case in point is the DJI Mini is 248 grams. So just 2 grams smaller. And so it doesn't transmit. But if you put in a bigger battery, and they do have this bigger battery that you can put into a Mini, it goes over that 250 grams and it starts transmitting its ID. So that's, some of the things that you have to take into account is that, if it's a DIY home built drone, no, it's not going to be broadcasting. If it's, if it's a really small drone like the minis, it's not going to broadcast. So remote ID, like I was showing you here, it's a really good tool. Sorry, not that one. It's this one. It's a really good tool for knowing kind of what's the drone traffic that's around you, but it's not necessarily the solution for everything. But it can help give you that kind of awareness, that situation awareness of what's what I call the careless, the clueless, and the low-end criminal activity. You think about how many people, get caught because they didn't change out their license plates and when they were committing a crime. So there's a lot of that activity happening, and there's a lot of, careless, like this guy who, flew, 3 miles over to the mountain that went over a water utility plant right here. If you can see, you see this line right there. He was just flying right there, That's the water utility in that area right there. So it's, I mean, obviously didn't do anything, but that's endangerment right there. What if that's a, critical substation like what we have down right here over here in this area, right down here, we've got a critical substation for the area. And we've seen drone activity just going right along that path there. So again, careless and clueless, and the remote ID is good for that. We got another question from Larry saying, if he's operating an industrial facility like a refinery, and we have drone incursions inside the perimeter, what should he do? David, you want to address that one?
Yeah, you bet. So here, I'll let me share a screen real quick. If I can get this pulled up here. In 1 second. Yeah, so that becomes a real issue, and there are specific things that you can and can't do. So here's a quick illustration of the technology stack, and everybody can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. So you see this acronym, we call it DTIM, but detect, track, identify, and mitigate, as you see down here on the bottom right, mitigate. The tricky part with this, with the new NDAA laws and Safer Skies Act, is that to detect, track, and identify, or now what's being included is information share. So you've got two I's, identify and information share, has to be done on NDAA equipment in order to mitigate. So the question is, how do we actually mitigate? And I think there's some follow-up questions: is how do we get rid of a drone that's in our airspace? Currently, it is federally illegal for you to go take out a drone out of your airspace unless you're law enforcement. Now, I'll get into that a little bit. So where does the airspace start? Does it start 30 feet over my house? Where does it start? Is there a bubble around the critical infrastructure, the energy plant or water treatment? This is going to be a pain point for most, but it starts at the top of your blade of grass. So if your kids are playing in their backyard and a drone comes and is hovering in your backyard an inch off the grass, and you go hit that drone with a baseball bat, that is technically considered a federal crime. You've taken out an FAA authorized vehicle. Is it encouraging into your airspace? I would say yes. Are there other penalties that could be tagged with? Is there some other kind of surveillance or something else that's going on? There could be other things. But the only people before December that could take a drone out of the sky were about 4 different federal agencies. And even in those federal agencies, they had restrictions. They had to be a drone that was coming directly against one of their facilities, like let's say your local FBI field office or Homeland Security, or it had to be a drone that was interfering with one of their missions. And that gave them the authorization to take that drone by force out of the sky. Now, with the laws changing in December, those mitigation capabilities have expanded, and it's got really a couple of parameters to it. It's expanded to your state and local law enforcement. So the way they define that is SLTT, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement. So all your local law enforcement. But they can only take a drone out of the sky once they've gone through a course that has been assembled by the FBI. It's still being assembled, that they get a certificate for, basically, that says we understand how drone mitigation works. We can't just take any vehicle out of the sky. It's got to be with authorized equipment, whether that's going to be done with a pulsed laser or EMP, or there's all kinds of different elements. Yeah, which one is that one?
So this is a jammer. This is a dual band jammer that can jam both Wi-Fi and GPS. So I mean that's kind of, again, that's kind of the big development for this year is that now it's not just these 5 federal agencies, but rather it's going down to the local law enforcement, and now local law enforcement can deploy these type of technologies to counter the drones. And with first level jamming, which is just jamming the Wi-Fi, the command and control software, or sorry, the command and control between the base station and the drone, I mean, that's just Wi-Fi. And so the collateral damage of that is pretty low. So that's that's a first step. And then most of the drones have a feature where if it loses contact with the base station, it will return to where it took off from. So that'd be the first step. The second is jamming the GPS, and the GPS is just, if you start jamming GPS, then it's going to come down. Now there's more sensitivity with GPS because a lot of emergency communication radios use GPS as a kind of like a synchronization signal. And if you interrupt that synchronization signal, the emergency communications can be affected. So they're concerned about that, plus aviation. If you've got a lot of the, aircraft are using GPS for navigation. So if you're jamming GPS and it interferes with an aircraft, that could be potentially putting people at risk. So scaling up to the next level of jamming GPS is more difficult. Well, I would just say looked at with more scrutiny and only would be probably allowed in the most kind of dangerous cases.
So what that falls back to for us on our responsibility, and for the follow-up question with Brian here about, hey, what happens if something's flying over my critical infrastructure? Is there going to be an expanded capability to integrate with that geofence? That's yet to come out, and there's not been an official statement on that yet. But here's what we do know: you can't address the issue if you haven't detected it, and detected it with the right equipment first. So when the NDAA laws passed in December, stating that this equipment has to meet National Defense Authorization Act criteria. In other words, the equipment's been developed by TAA compliant countries. It's not developed by China or Russia or other countries that are adversarial to the United States and want to use that information against us. When that came out, there were a lot of companies that were almost instantly washed out, because they were selling cheap products built on, let's say, Raspberry Pis or Spessa boards or whatever that it is. And it's always been a priority to our company, to Surveillance One, and to Spotter Global as well, because of our defense contracts, that we're going to be NDAA compliant to start with. So that was never, we didn't even miss a beat. We already sit here. So the responsibility then comes to us, is how do we get the right equipment in the right place and architect it in a way that makes sense for your organization, and how to get the right type of mitigation handoff.
And thanks, David. Along with that, and I think partly to answer, Brian's question a little bit more, is yes, the critical infrastructure doesn't have, or critical infrastructure, security managers don't necessarily have the ability or the legal authority right now to mitigate drones that are in their facilities or over their facilities. Unfortunately, that was not, there's a little bit of, like you're saying, alluding to it, but it hasn't been, written into law yet. I do expect that that's going to happen fairly soon. Now that we've seen that they're delegating this authority to local law enforcement, I think it's just a matter of time. And I'm not talking like 5 years, I'm talking maybe a year, maybe 2 years before critical infrastructure sites, with these, critical substations, these data centers, even the airports, will be allowed to do a certain level of mitigation. Where that will fall, I mean, like I was saying, most likely it'll fall at, jamming the command and control signal between the drone to send them back home, because that has the least amount of collateral damage, and it's fairly straightforward to do. I think that'll be the first step there. David, did you have any other opinions on that one?
No, I think that's right. Part of the challenge of this is that there's a lot of other things that are being contested for the airspace right now. And so I'll show you, oops. I'll show a quick picture. This is from an airport that we're talking with. Basically, this airport, they're using our Strata system. We're interested to use our strategic, tactical reconnaissance and airspace tracking architecture that we use the spotter backbone with. But notice this right here. This is an aeronautical map. This circle is a circle that was authorized by the FAA for Walmart to fly their delivery drones. But what I want you to notice, while this is about 2 miles away, notice there that it's butting up right against the edge of the runway. And they're authorized to fly to 300 feet. When airplanes come in on final, it's about 300 to 400 feet descending down through this area. Well, what if they're off track? I mean, look at how dangerous this is. And so the point I'm making with that is that there's a lot of different contests for the airspace. It's not just what do we do with drones, and are we using it to film a real estate site or something like that. It's that everybody wants their Amazon delivery faster or their Walmart delivery faster. And so we're trying to find ways to how do we make the pathways in the sky be realistic, but also how do we do it in a safe way and in a way that protects all the rest of our critical infrastructure. And that's just logistical questions. That's not talking about malevolent threat or the 15-year-old kid that just got his drone for his birthday. And the first thing he wants to do is see how high he can fly it or see how far he can fly it, unaware of, kind of the clueless aspect that Logan was talking about. It's not even a malevolent intent. So take that into consideration when we're not even discussing malevolent intent yet.
Yeah, so just kind of in summary, I'll put this slide up here with counter drone tech because that's also developing, pretty rapidly right now, along with the drones themselves. Is the first, like David was saying, you can't mitigate anything you can't see. So first of all, of course, we've talked about the different detection technologies. And then your countermeasures, there's all kinds, like drone on drones that run into or capture other drones with nets. There's lasers, like this person right here is shooting a what's called a net gun. So it's shooting out a shell that has a little net embedded in it, and pretty short range, 50-meter type range. Of course, we talked about the jamming systems, and then other kinetic response. In the field in Ukraine, they're finding shotguns to be one of the most effective. That's like the last measure of defense. But shooting it down is, with a shotgun, has been what they've had to do.
And we've seen that use here. It's just please keep in mind it's not legal.
Yeah. I'm not trying to encourage shooting down drones in the United States with shotguns,
right.
But
yeah,
rather it's what's happening in a war zone.
Yeah, that's good.
So just to kind of summarize, let's see here, to summarize the counter drone tech that's available here. It's a combination, right? It's usually multiple layers, and in our system, in our backbone, we use a combination of compact radar for these shorter range, more complex environments. We use remote ID for these kind of more cooperative and the careless and clueless. We cue cameras onto target for evaluation of the potential threat. And the nice thing about in the combination of these is that when you see something on radar and you don't see its remote ID broadcast, then you can automatically go to a higher threat level because it's not something that's compliant. Because all commercial drones, even hobbyists, are supposed to have that to be legal, and they can be fined up to $250,000, like David was saying, by the FAA if they're not legal. So that's definitely something you can do to raise your threat level. And then with that information, then it's saying, okay, well, what can you do now that you know that a drone is there or surveilling? Because you can start seeing patterns, like you can see, like in some cases, You can see that a drone was flying over a particular site multiple times over the course of a week. We've seen that ourselves, and like, okay, well, what's going on? I would say that that's a high likelihood that they're surveilling that location for potential wrongdoing. So with that information, you can do a lot.
I think that's great. Logan, you want to take this to application? You ready to
Yeah.
change gears? I will share my screen again real quick. When it comes to application, here's the bottom line. We've got all this technology that's now becoming available. That technology is becoming financially accessible. With that technology and all this fantastic product that Spotter Global has together, and by the way, there's a lot of product here, dozens of products from Spotter Global that are inside of one ecosystem that you're not having to go out to find disparate systems and try to, plug and play and match and get firmware updates to all match at the same time and that type of thing. This is really a powerful platform. Once we have that platform in place, we can't afford to just see this as a band-aid solution like we were talking about before. I think one of the problems in the security industry, what I've seen in almost 3 decades here, is when our tendency to say, I have a sore spot over here. I'm just going to go put something in place to make the pain point go away. And I'm going to call it good. And we'll get an alert. If something comes in the airspace, we'll get an alert. That's great. Problem is we can't afford to think like that. We've got to look at the architecture as a whole. So it's kind of like, for those of you who have been in the security industry for a long time, remember the organized retail crime rings? And they're still going. That happens every day in America. But basically what it looks like, let's say you have a retail site. Somebody walks in the door and they've got an intent to steal merchandise. They're a shoplifter or whatever. Maybe they're known by the retail store itself. And it pops up. They've got it on the cameras. But what happens in organized retail crime is another cohort or two of theirs comes in through a different door. Or maybe there's another one or two in a different part of the store already. And they all have their headset in, just, Apple, earpods or whatever, and they're talking to each other. And while everybody's looking at one person or one group, there's something else going on somewhere else. And they're communicating over their phone saying, hey, they're, this person, I got the asset protection or security guard is watching you. I've got them identified. Well, then now the next person goes and does what they're doing. Think of that same application in the airspace. It doesn't matter if you've got something happening on the ground that's creating an incident on the ground. Well, what's happening in the air at the same time? What if it's the other way around? What if you've got something happening in the air over here, so all your attention is focused over there, if you see it, while meanwhile another drone is somewhere else, or somebody on the ground is creating something. And what I'm trying to get at here is you have to look at this from a holistic architecture perspective. And that architecture perspective starts with methodology. So this is just a screen share from our website. Obviously, airspace disruptions in the air, disruptions in the air create disruptions on the ground. When we're talking about methodology, we can't afford to look at it anymore in terms of probabilistics or likelihood. How likely is it that a drone's going to fly over my facility or do something bad? We can no longer afford to make that gamble. So what we have to do is look at your defense layers or security layers, which if you're in the security industry, this has been around a long, long time. The security layers or defense layers. The problem is how the security layers have been set up over the last 25 years, at least since 9/11. The defense layers were set up to say, well, here's your layer. You can choose to put something in it or not, but this is what an adversary on ground or in the air is going to have to go through to get to your critical asset. And now what we're doing is we're going back to say using a model called cumulative defense strategy. I should have it written here on the screen, but cumulative defense strategy. What that does is says that if you increase the quantity and quality of countermeasures at each defense layer, then now we have a measurable path for resilience. Your resilience actually increases. It's not static. When we have that capability, and this is the math formula for this, by the way, this was published just a few years ago and was recently adopted by the water sector as their go-to security standard for malevolent threat. So this is not just some cooked up thing. This has been peer reviewed by, it had the opportunity for 300,000 engineers in America when that came together. So now that we have the methodology in place, we can now measure. So we're going to make measurements, even in your airspace. We're going to make measurements. And we're going to see what are the critical pathways to your critical asset. So take, for instance, an aircraft coming in on final. Well, its most critical areas are below 1,000 feet or below 500 feet or below 400 feet when it comes in on final. So its final approach path or its departure path, that's its most critical place in the airspace. There's others as well. So we're going to measure that, and we're going to see, well, what tools have been put into place? And at what layers are we detecting that? And how do those layers increase? What gives us the greatest opportunity to get in front of it? Well, once we have the measurement, we can now identify the gaps. Once we have the gaps, we can say, well, we're missing areas here. We're missing areas there. Or maybe there's no airspace detection at all. Or maybe there's gaps in the ground security platform. You have to put those two together if you're going to see the whole site picture. And so the difference here is that with the right architecture, measurement, and application to those gaps, now we have outcome-driven security. We have a plan now of basically how to get in front of it. So having said that, I'll leave you with this. The closing part of that is the response plan. Like I said, you can't just stick a Band-Aid on it. Otherwise, you're just creating early awareness. The value shows up is when your system now hands your team a clear path to action with roles, responsibility, thresholds that are met. What's the escalation path? What's the documentation that they already have in hand to take to action so that the first decision is fast, it's consistent, and it's defensible. So without a designed response plan that's specific to your site, counter UAS is just a dashboard. If you've got the response plan, all those tools become an action plan. They become an actual outcome. So the summary then is this question: how quickly can you see and respond? And how well that is answered is how well you're going to be able to determine the outcome for your organization.
Thanks, David.
All right.
That's excellent. We have just a few more minutes left. If you've got we can answer a couple questions if you'd like. Just you put it in the chat. Let's give you a minute here. If there's anyone who's got additional questions on that. But I agree with what David's saying is that if you don't have the processes, you're missing a big part. I look at it as a three-legged stool. You have the people, first of all, then you have the technology, and then you have the processes. If you don't have all three, then you're not really solving the problem. Yeah. All right. Well, if there's no further questions, thanks for joining us. Look forward to next month. We will be doing another webinar on the third week on March 18th. And we'll be have another one of our partners who's going to be joining, Industrial ENet. And great to have David here. And feel free to reach out to David or ourselves if you'd like to get more into detail. We will send a follow-up email with a link to this recording so you can refer back to it, and also a link to schedule a meeting with one of our service people. And yep, thanks, David. Got your LinkedIn out there. And we're here to help to see if we can solve some of your security problems. So thanks so much.
I'll tack onto that. This weekend, we're just launching a new newsletter. So if you're connected with me directly on LinkedIn, you'll have access to that, but it will address the specific ground to air security issues. And that'll be a weekly newsletter that'll come out. And in that, we'll also talk about product and how to apply product into your critical infrastructure application or for your critical security. And there's some real specific things here about why we use the product we use with Spotter and how it's uniquely different for security platforms. This is not, I'll say it this way, there are some of the products here that are uniquely built specifically for drones. They're not general purpose use. So specifically tailored for the drone application. So, all right, guys, thank you.
All right. Have a great Wednesday.
All right, see ya.